I used to believe love was something you conquer, something you get right once and never question again. I thought if you cared enough, if you stayed long enough, love would reward you with certainty. But life has a quiet way of correcting us. Not loudly, not cruelly, just honestly. And one day, you wake up and realize you were wrong about love. Love isn't possession. It isn't sacrifice without balance. It isn't losing yourself to prove your loyalty. Real love doesn't ask you to disappear so someone else can feel whole. It asks you to grow, to stand, to become more yourself. And sometimes, the hardest truth isn't that someone else failed us, but that we misunderstood what love was meant to be. Today, this is not a story of bitterness. This is a story of clarity, of learning, of overcoming what I was wrong about, and finally understanding love for what it truly is. I was wrong about love because I thought it was something you give away until there's nothing left of you. I believed love was proven by endurance, by how much you could tolerate, by how deeply you could bury your own needs and still stay. I thought if I could love harder, stay quieter, bend further, then love would eventually notice me and reward me with peace. That belief didn't come from weakness. It came from hope, and hope, when it's unguarded, can teach you the wrong lessons. I grew up thinking love was measured by sacrifice. The more you gave up, the more real it was. Your time, your dreams, your boundaries, your voice. I thought love was staying even when something inside you was slowly breaking, because leaving felt like failure. I told myself that pain was temporary, that confusion was normal, that silence was just another phase. I convinced myself that love was supposed to hurt before it healed, but some pain doesn't heal. Some pain only teaches you how to disappear politely. I remember the moments where I chose love over myself. They didn't feel dramatic. They felt reasonable, just small compromises, one after another. Don't say that, don't want too much, don't ask again, don't be difficult. Each time I told myself it was maturity. I told myself I was being understanding. What I didn't realize was that I was slowly training myself to believe my needs were a problem, and love should never make you feel like your existence requires an apology. I was wrong because I thought being needed was the same as being loved. When someone relied on me, leaned on me, depended on my strength, I felt valuable. I mistook responsibility for intimacy. I told myself that if I could hold everything together, then I mattered. But being needed can trap you in a role where you are useful, not cherished, where your worth is measured by how much weight you can carry without collapsing. Love isn't supposed to feel like a job you're afraid to quit. I ignored the quiet signals. The way my laughter changed, the way I started choosing words carefully, like I was walking through a room full of fragile glass, the way my excitement softened into caution. I told myself this was just what commitment looked like. I told myself that passion settles, that fire fades, that depth replaces desire. But depth doesn't feel like emptiness. Love doesn't require you to shrink so someone else can feel secure. I was wrong about love because I believed loyalty meant staying no matter the cost. I thought leaving was betrayal, even when staying was destroying me. I believed love demanded permanence, even if it came with loneliness. I didn't understand that loyalty without self-respect becomes self-abandonment. And self-abandonment slowly teaches you to accept things you never should have normalized. There were nights I lay awake wondering why love felt so heavy, why my chest felt tight, even when everything looked fine from the outside. I blamed myself. I thought I wasn't patient enough, kind enough, evolved enough. I thought love required silence, that speaking up would break something fragile. But love that cannot survive honesty was never strong to begin with. I was wrong to think love was about proving endurance, that if I could withstand the worst moments, they would somehow validate the best ones. I stayed for potential, I stayed for memories, I stayed for promises that sounded beautiful but never quite arrived. I didn't realize that love lives in consistency, not in hope, in actions, not explanations, in presence, not excuses. I confused intensity with connection. The highs felt meaningful because the lows were unbearable. I thought the emotional extremes meant depth. I didn't know that peace could be passionate too. That stability isn't boring, it's safe. That calm doesn't mean empty, it means secure. Love doesn't need chaos to feel alive. I was wrong because I believed love meant understanding everything, even things that hurt me. I became fluent in excuses that weren't mine. I learned to explain away neglect, to rationalize distance, to translate indifference into misunderstanding. I thought empathy meant enduring. I didn't know empathy also includes yourself. There was a moment when I realized I no longer recognized myself. Not in the mirror, not in my thoughts, not in my dreams. The things that once mattered to me felt distant. The voice inside me had grown quiet, and that silence was the most honest thing I had ignored. Love, should add to who you are, not erase you. I was wrong about love because I believed it was something you earn, as if being good enough, patient enough, loyal enough would finally unlock it. But love is not a reward system. It is not a test you pass by suffering correctly. Love is given freely or it is not love at all. I remember the fear of leaving, not because I didn't know it was hurting me, but because I didn't know who I would be without it. When you lose yourself slowly, you start believing the cage is your identity. You start believing that freedom will feel like emptiness, but staying where you are unseen is the loneliest place there is. I was wrong because I thought love meant fixing things, fixing people, fixing situations, fixing wounds that were never mine to heal. I took responsibility for pain I didn't cause. I carried guilt for problems I didn't create. I thought if I could just love harder, everything would align. But love is not repair work. It's partnership. I didn't understand that love listens, that it adjusts, that it grows with you instead of asking you to stay the same. I thought love was static, something you commit to and then endure. I didn't know love evolves, and if it doesn't, it suffocates. I was wrong to think love required constant forgiveness without change. Forgiveness without accountability becomes permission, and permission allows patterns to repeat. Love isn't about endless second chances. It's about mutual effort to do better. There were moments when my intuition spoke clearly, when something felt off, when my heart warned me quietly. I dismissed it. I thought doubt meant weakness, but intuition is not fear. It's wisdom earned through experience. Love doesn't ask you to silence your inner voice. I was wrong about love because I believed staying proved strength. But sometimes strength is choosing yourself. Strength is walking away from something that no longer reflects who you are. Strength is admitting that love shouldn't cost you your identity. I learned that love doesn't make you feel small. It doesn't make you question your worth. It doesn't punish you for having boundaries. Love meets you where you are and encourages you to become more, not less. I was wrong because I thought love was about attachment, about holding on tightly so nothing slips away. But real love isn't afraid of space. It trusts. It breathes. It allows two whole people to stand side by side without gripping each other out of fear. I believed love meant never giving up, but sometimes giving up is choosing a healthier beginning. Sometimes endings are not failures, they are corrections. They are life redirecting you towards something truer. I was wrong about love because I thought it demanded silence, but love speaks, love asks, love listens, love responds. Love does not leave you alone in your confusion. I began to understand that love should feel like clarity, not constant doubt, like warmth, not anxiety, like mutual effort, not one-sided endurance. And the most difficult realization wasn't that someone else failed me, but that I had failed myself by accepting less than I deserved. I was wrong about love because I thought it lived outside of me, that someone else could define my worth, my happiness, my completeness. But love that begins outside of you can be taken away. Love that begins within you teaches you how to choose better, how to walk away sooner, how to recognize when something is no longer love. And the truth I learned slowly, painfully, honestly, was that losing myself was never love at all. It was fear disguised as devotion. It was hope stretched too thin. It was loyalty without balance. And understanding that didn't come all at once. It came in quiet realizations, in moments of stillness, in the slow rebuilding of a voice I had ignored for too long, in learning how to stand alone without feeling empty and recognizing that love should never require you to disappear to be worthy of staying. I confused patience with pain, And I told myself that endurance was a virtue, even when it was slowly wearing me down. I believed that if I stayed calm, if I waited long enough, if I didn't react too strongly, things would eventually change. I thought patience was proof of love, proof of maturity, proof that I was strong enough to hold space for another person's struggles. What I didn't understand was that patience is meant to protect growth, not excuse harm. I stayed quiet when something hurt because I didn't want to be misunderstood. I waited when I should have spoken. I forgave quickly, not because healing had happened, but because I was afraid of conflict. I told myself that love meant giving people time, even when time was only teaching them that my pain was negotiable. I didn't realize that patience without boundaries teaches others how far they can go. There were moments when I felt something was wrong, but I convinced myself that discomfort was part of the process. I told myself real connections aren't easy, that depth comes with difficulty. I thought if I could just be more patient, more understanding, more flexible, the weight I was carrying would eventually feel lighter. Instead, it became familiar. And familiar pain is dangerous because once you get used to it, you stop questioning it. I waited for apologies that never came, for changes that were always promised but never practiced. I accepted explanations instead of effort. I listened to words carefully while ignoring actions completely. I thought patience meant believing in someone's potential more than their patterns. But patterns are the truth people live by, not the futures they talk about. I told myself not to rush things, not to pressure, not to ask for clarity. I believed patience meant suppressing my needs so I wouldn't seem demanding. I didn't see that love isn't fragile in the face of honesty. Love doesn't collapse because you ask where you stand. Love that requires silence to survive was already unstable. I confused being calm with being numb. I confused being patient with being passive. I convinced myself that my ability to tolerate emotional discomfort was a strength, but strength that costs you your peace is not strength, it's survival. And survival mode slowly erases joy, curiosity, and self-respect. There were days when I felt exhausted without knowing why. Nothing dramatic had happened. Nothing obvious was wrong, yet everything felt heavy. That was the weight of unspoken feelings, the cost of constantly choosing patience over truth. When you hold things in long enough, your body starts speaking for you. The tiredness, the anxiety, the tight chest, the restlessness, all signs that patience had crossed into self-neglect. I told myself everyone struggles, everyone has flaws, everyone needs time. And that's true. But not everyone makes you feel alone while standing right in front of you. Not everyone listens without hearing. Not everyone promises growth while repeating the same behavior. Patience is powerful when there is movement. Without movement, patience becomes stagnation. I stayed because I didn't want to give up too soon. I was afraid of being impatient, of walking away before something had the chance to improve. But there's a difference between giving time and wasting it. Time given to someone who is trying feels different than time given to someone who is comfortable where things are. One feels hopeful, the other feels draining. I began to notice how often I was adjusting my expectations, adjusting my tone, adjusting my reactions, always adapting, always accommodating, always understanding. I thought that flexibility was love. I didn't realize that constantly bending eventually changes your shape. I waited through silence, through distance, through emotional absence. I told myself not to take things personally. I explained away what didn't feel right. I learned to sit with uncertainty and call it patience, but uncertainty that never resolves is not a test of patience. It's a signal. I confused patience with loyalty. I believed staying proved commitment. I thought leaving meant I hadn't tried hard enough. I didn't understand that loyalty to others should never come at the cost of loyalty to yourself. You can be patient and still walk away. You can be kind and still choose yourself. There were moments when my heart wanted to speak, but my mind stopped it. I didn't want to seem drama. Tick. I didn't want to create tension. I didn't want to risk losing something I had already invested so much in. That's how patience turns into fear. Fear of change, fear of loss, fear of starting over. I told myself love isn't perfect, and it isn't. But love also isn't supposed to leave you guessing about your worth. Patience doesn't mean accepting confusion as normal. It doesn't mean living in emotional limbo. It doesn't mean waiting endlessly for consistency. I realized I had been patient with things that should have been addressed immediately. disrespect disguised as jokes, distance explained as busyness, neglect softened with occasional affection. I accepted small moments of warmth as proof that everything else was fine. I didn't see that inconsistency trains you to settle. I was proud of my patience. I wore it like a badge of honor. I thought it made me emotionally strong, evolved, understanding. But patience that asks you to endure repeated hurt isn't wisdom. It's avoidance. It's the fear of making a hard decision. I learned that patience is meant to support healing, not replace accountability. It's meant to exist alongside effort, communication, and respect. Without those, patience becomes permission, and permission allows the same pain to return in different forms. There was a moment when I realized I wasn't waiting for change anymore. I was waiting because I didn't know how to leave. That was the clearest truth I had ignored. When patience turns into waiting for the bare minimum, something is already broken. I confused patience with hope. I thought hope meant staying optimistic no matter what. But hope without evidence becomes denial. Real hope is grounded. It grows when actions align with words. It doesn't ask you to suffer quietly. I began to understand that patience should never silence your intuition. If something feels wrong consistently, patience isn't the solution. Awareness is, and awareness often asks you to do the one thing patience avoids, which is to confront reality honestly. I was patient with someone who wasn't patient with my feelings. I waited for understanding while constantly offering it. I gave space without receiving reassurance. I listened without being heard. And I told myself that love meant balance would come later. Later never came. I realized that patience is not about enduring discomfort indefinitely. It's about allowing time for growth when growth is actually happening. When nothing changes, patience becomes a way to delay grief, to postpone acceptance, to avoid admitting that what you're waiting for may never arrive. I had to learn that choosing myself didn't make me impatient. It made me honest. It made me brave enough to admit that patience had turned into self-sacrifice, that waiting had turned into loss of time, loss of peace, loss of parts of myself I had slowly put aside. And the truth I had to face was that pain doesn't become meaningful just because you endure it quietly. Love doesn't require you to be endlessly patient with behavior that keeps hurting you. And learning that difference was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet, heavy, and deeply clarifying, like finally understanding that the strength I was proud of had been keeping me in a place where I was no longer growing, only surviving, only waiting, only hoping that silence would someday turn into understanding, that patience would magically become love, that enduring would finally be enough to make someone meet me where I had been standing alone for far too long. I learned that love begins with truth, not fantasy, not promises, not the version of someone I hoped they would become. Truth is quieter than hope, but it is steadier. It doesn't rush to impress you. It doesn't need you to ignore what you see. Truth simply stands there and waits for you to be honest with yourself. For a long time, I avoided truth because it felt like loss. I thought facing reality meant admitting failure, admitting that I had invested in something that wasn't real. So I chose comfort over clarity. I chose stories over facts. I chose what could be instead of what was. And every time I did, I moved a little further away from myself. Truth doesn't shout. It shows up in patterns, in consistency, in how someone treats you when there is nothing to gain, in how they respond when you express discomfort, in how safe you feel being yourself without editing your words or emotions. I ignored those signals because I wanted love to be something it wasn't. I told myself that seeing the good in people was a strength, and it is. But seeing only the good while denying the truth is self-deception. Love doesn't require you to be blind. It requires you to be present. Present with what is, not what you wish it were. When I finally allowed myself to sit with the truth, it was uncomfortable. It dismantled the narrative I had been protecting. It forced me to acknowledge that effort had been uneven, that connection had been conditional, that my needs had been consistently postponed. Truth stripped away the excuses I had memorized so well. I learned that love built on fantasy is fragile. It depends on potential, on future versions, on imagined change. Love built on truth is grounded. It doesn't promise perfection. It offers honesty. It doesn't avoid difficult conversations. It welcomes them. Truth taught me that clarity is kindness. Ambiguity is not romantic. Mixed signals are not depth. Confusion is not chemistry. When love is real, it doesn't leave you guessing where you stand. It doesn't keep you in emotional suspense. I had to admit that I sometimes avoided truth because it threatened my identity. I had become the patient one, the understanding one, the one who stayed. Letting go of that meant redefining myself. It meant choosing integrity over familiarity. Truth revealed that love is not about intensity, but alignment, not about how strongly you feel, but how consistently you are shown care. It's not found in dramatic moments, but in everyday respect, in reliability, in mutual presence. I realized that truth requires courage, the courage to ask uncomfortable questions, the courage to listen to answers you may not like, the courage to walk away when honesty reveals incompatibility. Love that begins with truth may hurt initially, but it prevents long-term damage. I learned that being honest with yourself is the first act of self-respect. When you stop negotiating your needs, when you stop minimizing your feelings, when you stop justifying neglect, you create space for healthier love to enter. Truth taught me that love should feel safe to question, safe to challenge, safe to grow within. If honesty threatens the connection was already unstable. I began to understand that truth is not harsh. It's clean. It clears the fog. It removes the emotional clutter created by assumptions and unspoken expectations. It brings simplicity where there was confusion. I stopped asking why someone couldn't love me the way I needed and started asking whether they were capable of it at all. That question changed everything. It shifted the focus from worth to compatibility, from self-blame to self-awareness. Truth showed me that love is not something you convince someone to give. It is something that flows naturally when two people are aligned. Effort should not feel like persuasion. I learned that honesty doesn't guarantee connection, but it guarantees peace. And peace is not boring. It is stable. It is grounding. It allows you to show up fully without fear of being misunderstood or dismissed. Truth required me to let go of what I had imagined, to grieve not just a person, but a future I had constructed in my mind. That grief was necessary. You cannot build something real on top of something imagined. I realized that love begins with telling yourself the truth, even when it breaks your heart, especially then, because heartbreak from truth heals faster than hope that keeps reopening the same wound. Truth taught me that love should meet you in the present, not hold you hostage to the future. It should recognize who you are now, not who you promised to become. I learned that when love is honest, it feels steady, not perfect, not effortless, but real. It allows room for mistakes without repeating the same hurt. It encourages growth without demanding self-erasure. Truth made me see that I had been trying to earn love instead of choosing it. And love that must be earned through suffering is not love, it's conditioning. I understood that loving myself meant no longer betraying my own reality, no longer staying silent when something felt wrong, no longer calling confusion a phase. Truth didn't make me cynical, it made me clear. Clear about what I need, clear about what I deserve, clear about what I will no longer accept. And in that clarity, I discovered that love doesn't start with another person. It starts with the courage to be honest with yourself, to trust what you see, to listen to what you feel, to stand in your truth even when it means standing alone, knowing that any love that finds you after that will not require you to abandon who you are to keep it alive.